Hi, I'm Steve Morse. On this video lesson, I'd like to talk about taking a scale sequence and breaking it up into phrases that you could actually use in a solo. The scale we're going to use is a combination of G Dorian mode and blues scale. Here's the notes. Now we're going to take the same notes and make a little exercise riff out of it just by making a sequence of 4 notes at a time. Go down 4, go up 3, down 4. Once more from the beginning. This is just a pattern over and over. Now I'm going to play it against a drum track and try to use the sequence that we just made an exercise out of in little bites to make a solo type phrase, or several solo phrases. And the basic thing will be just chopping it up, not using it all at once. With the multitude of shredding licks available on tablature and in how-to books, I hear a lot of guitarists learning difficult runs and very, very long scale passages and practicing them endlessly, which is a great way to build up your technique. In putting together solo, I think the best approach is to take the shapes that you've learned and divide them into musical phrases that are 2 bars or less most of the time. And that's a great starting point. I mean, your playing will progress throughout your whole career, but right now, the best thing I can say to most guitarists to improve their playing and their soloing is to take a breath every 2 bars. The same way a vocalist would have to, same way a horn player would have to. And that way you're automatically going to get little phrases out of it. So what we've just done in this first example is rest, rest, longer. Still there's a little rest, so no matter where we go. And by making short, long, it gives a certain rhythm to it, just like in a poem or a limerick or anything like that. One thing that you could do if you've already learned a scale or pattern, one thing you can do to change it is to add a passing note or a chromatic note, basically a note that isn't in the scale or pattern, but that quickly resolves to a note that does fit the pattern. So in this example, all I'm going to do is add 1 note that's not in the scale, and that's the F sharp, and it's going to quickly go to the G. Instead. So. as a guitar player, you practice technique, you practice scales, you practice theory, learning songs, and really from the beginning we should be practicing making phrases out of what we've learned. So this is something you can do anytime you learn a new riff or scale. Try playing it differently. Try taking it into bits. Try making different phrases out of it. Try playing it in octaves, harmonizing it in thirds, sixths. Anything you can do to make music out of it. Your whole life, your challenge will be to make music out of what you hear in your mind, and to make music with the musical shapes that your fingers have learned. And the best way is to start taking these scale ideas and turning them into musical phrases. And musical phrases always have an end. So practice, like I said, taking a breath and making little phrases out of every scale idea or every new position of playing something that you learn.
All right, I'm Yngwie Malmsteen. We're here today to talk a little bit about guitar playing, fast, slow, whatever, and enjoy. Like there's a... There's basically just a scale, but you go, you know, it goes all over. Mm-hmm. That's what I was going for from very early on. Right. And in other words, the whole reason I play the way I play is because I wanted to go away from this guitar player playing this, and everybody listen to him, and they do their way of doing that, and like on it goes, you know. And I wanted to challenge myself mainly, you know, with trying to play some crazy stuff that was done on violin, you know, which is a different instrument, you know. And they tune in fifths, so like really widespread scales that's what they did, you know, because it's like a shorter scale and it's done in fifths. So like you move your fingers less, and all of a sudden a lot more happens, you know. So it's a bit of a challenge, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But that's what I dug, you know, and I still do. And so the main reason, as much as I love the blues, the main reason I went away from it was because I felt that was boxed in, and I wanted to break out of that. So that was the natural progression for me to do then would be to play, you know, which is, I guess you would call a harmonic minor, like that. Or if you invert that from A minor to E minor, that would be Phrygian, which is just saying relative scales. And also with the major third, it's perfect because it links together with the diminished, which is that it links it together perfectly, you know, so you can mix and match them, throw together any way you like. Okay, when you do it on all the strings, it might be a little more complicated, but if you learn it first just on one string, if you learn that form, like that form, how you start with on one string, you know, those, then all of a sudden, oh, that makes sense, and you can play the same note on different strings, and it just a little thought process, you know. The E Phrygian would be, and the exact same notes in A minor harmonic would be augmented seventh in that particular key, it's called augmented seventh. In E would be the major third. You want to link them together with the third in the Phrygian diminished. And all of a sudden you have all those three things perfectly together. Right. And it's very much sort of the bread and butter of what I do, you know, for my own thing, you know. And then of course you can make these things into all sorts of different patterns. You know, for instance, you could skip the note in the scale and just do forms like that. Start here. You could do like the diminished again and link it together. Okay, that's 2 strings. We could do a 3 string. I never forget the first time I went to Japan, like 25 years ago. They started asking me, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I go, I don't know, man. You know, all I knew was when I started out, I'll tell you what happened. What I knew, and everybody thinks like I'm completely full of it when I say this, but this is the truth. They asked me for advice. I go, play with the ears. Play with the ears. When it sounds good, it's good. If it sounds good, it's good. And you have good ears, you'll know when it's good, yeah? And I knew that I didn't want to play and it's make it sound like that. I wanted it to be note for note clean, you know? Right. And I wasn't thinking about what I was doing, but I knew what I wanted to hear. Right. And I was working on it very hard until I got what I wanted, you know? It's the same thing as like if you do like a lick like this, legato, legato is a great, we're talking about picking. Legato is a beautiful thing in this. My favorite legato player, of course, is Holdsworth, you know. He's amazing. But legato is a great thing because you have that tone, right? Or you can do with a pick and then you have a different tone. So all of a sudden you have the 2 choices, which is you can mix and the staccato legato like. On the low ones, we always sound a little cooler, more staccato, you know? Like that, you know, and they go. You know, stuff like that. Sounds cool, you know. That's why I'm going for whatever comes out sounding bitching, you know? You know, that's what arpeggios like, was dramatic, you know. Oh, drama, you know.
Are you just doing straight alternate picking when you're...
On this. Not when I go to different strings.
What do you do?
I don't know. Actually, I haven't looked at that, but we can look at it. When I just play like that, I don't think about what I'm doing. I'm just playing whatever it takes, what note is. For the lower thing, I think it's like kind of like this. But when I go to the next string, it has to be like different.
Well, you do this thing where you look like you either pull a pick back or when you do move over to the other string. I know, you just play.
Yeah, it's funny because that reminds me of I used to have a bass player a long time ago. He used to look at my picking hand. He's like, looks like you're knitting. It's a little bit of a violin technique. It's called pizzicato. You actually make the note with your left hand, like that. You know. That's without it. This is with it. So it's a mixture of actually doing this.
I think that, well, number one, I'm attracted to it. I resonate with it, you know, the blues sound and the rhythmic approach. And it seems like the opposite of playing in that style is sort of like being caged in a way, I mean, rhythmically. To be stuck with just quarter notes and eighth notes and 16th notes, to me, just gives a feeling that's a bit alien to me, you know. So when I hear players of any genre kind of break free of that, I don't care if it's classical music or jazz or blues or rock, to me that sounds right. That's expressive. And I want to hear it over and over again. It almost like, it sounds as if it has some sort of life-giving property that every time you hear it, you hear something new about it, you know. And it must be because, you know, I think the player is really not giving up on any level of expression, because it takes quite a bit more, I think, creativity to make something like that work, because you're not relying on this sort of quantized, you know, idea, you know, that you know you're going to do this thing and it's going to all fit, and therefore it will be right because it fits. You know what I mean? It's like when someone plays something and rhythmically all the notes fit in there, then it's correct, and it sort of gives this, I think it gives a kind of a false legitimacy to it, and then you wind up with a cookie cutter melody, solo, whatever. But it seems like all these really great solos and melody parts are the ones that are free of that. There's an observation that I always make, that the solo is either the real expression of the piece, it's very important for its melodic content, or maybe the role that it plays is to throw in something out of left field. Maybe it's the sound. Maybe that's all. It's just weird. It's supposed to come on really strong. Sometimes the solo really isn't very different at all from the melody. They're just one continuous piece. And you know, for those of us who started playing music in, you know, rock bands where we got 4 or 8 bars now and then, the arrangement of what a guitar solo did was very different. And when I started doing these instrumental records, I realized that none of that applied anymore. It just didn't work. The solos just didn't pop out, because you'd heard all this guitar right up into the solo. So what else is there to say, you know? And that's a very important part. So I think on the certainly not as a rule, but it seems like very often in the slower pieces that are more ballad-like, not just slow, but more ballad-like, that there's more of a need of continuity there between the melody and the solo, even in the sound of the guitar. And I started playing I remember just doing, you know, trying to play over stuff like this and seeing how slow I could get, and wanting to figure out how come other guys can go and make it sound really great. You know, because there's a million places to do that over a beat, but when is the right time to do it, you know? And then I thought about, well, you know, there's ways of playing it. And then, you know, where you move your pick as you play it, and how, what notes you pinch, what notes you don't.
So listening for all the variables.
Yes.
And the emotive quality that's going to yield
Yeah.
somehow.
And you know, that's not only so that's guided me towards a, you know, kind of picks and strings and guitars and amps, everything, because I'm looking for stuff that allows me to speak in that sort of language, you know. So each third is not a minor nor a major. And then when you finally do hit that major third, it has such an impact. It's finally sort of finished your statement, you know. And it makes it even stranger. I think that if you go, that's just me picking without anything to it, you know, but on these phrases, yeah. But if it's, and all that requires pinching the pick, you know, this note you hit hard, that note you barely touch, and that creates this dynamic sound as well as the volume dynamic. And I think that's what, at least that's what I'm always hearing when I hear those great old solos. It just feels like I'm not hearing so much discipline in, you know, that someone would have had from, you know, from doing this all the time and trying to be even up and down the fretboard. All I'm hearing is unusual, quirky habits that manifest themselves in. And that's with a little bit of English all over. I'm picking, and see, there's like a there, and then there's that. I could have gone. That's with no pick stuff on it. Then that's with me pinching a little bit, and then if I'm using the middle finger there to get that. Getting that.
All right, so I'm going to talk about how we take small melodic ideas or sequences and how we try to expand them by moving across octaves. And we're going to focus on not taking it this way, but sort of getting out of that up and down and getting more of a diagonal motion, whether going diagonally this way or diagonal this way, or even just moving up the fretboard this way. And I think the thing that's great about doing that is that you cover a lot of range, and it makes you explore the different you know, octaves and areas on the guitar instead of just staying in one little spot. And I think that's something that's good for people to sort of break out of. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a very simple series of notes. It's sort of a melodic series of notes, and it's part of a scale, but because it's not all the notes of the scale, the melody emphasizes some cool notes. If it's an E minor, which is always fun, I'm just going to play B, E, F sharp, and G. So basically, I'm just outlining a minor chord with an added ninth. So, you know, that sounds really good against E, and also sounds really good against C as more of a Lydian sound. All right, so very simple to get used to, just 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the next thing to do, and this is probably the easiest way to make something move diagonally, is just play it in the next octave on the next 2 strings. And the guitar is laid out perfectly for this, because you don't have to change fingerings at all. It's the same exact shape. You just have to move up to the next octave. So it would be right here. And then finally. And once again, that shape is the same in all 3 spots. Now, as far as playing it, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can use it as sort of a melodic idea or basic areas for melodic ideas. So you might be starting down. That's more of using it to play a melody and spanning the range of the guitar in 3 octaves. Another way you can use it is as a passage or as a run to link lower notes to higher notes. So something like that might be just actually playing it through all the octaves. And up on top there, as I bent the F sharp, I was making a reference to the D major chord. And all that stuff, you know, it sounds good to play different chords or to imply different chords over constant roots. Now taking the same idea, the 3 octaves moving diagonal in E minor, and by adding one more note to it, adding a C to it, it makes the pattern more conducive for playing faster type of licks as opposed to more melodic passages. So we're going to add a C. And what I would do instead of picking all those notes is I'd come up with a pattern that was involved a little bit of a hammer-on and slide. So more like. So I'm playing the first note, hammering on the second note, playing the third note, and the fourth, and then sliding. All right, so going back down, it's just the opposite slide. All right, so that's ascending and descending. As far as the descending, I'm just picking, sliding down. It's kind of get like an alternate thing, but with the hammer-on sort of taking the place of some of the picking. Right. So I think you get this sort of skipping feeling. Yeah, it kind of feels like you're skipping. Same thing. So it's like. Now also you could make sort of faster licks out of that if you just want to stay in one spot and sort of do a cyclic thing, which is always fun when you're really going for it and you want to do something that creates a lot of tension and builds. So that same pattern, I would just pick it like all alternate. Down, up, down, up, down. So kind of, cool little lick. It's fun. Well, when you do it that way, it has a triplet feel to it, a 16th note triplet. And I might practice that by playing just the first part by itself. And then trying to get, maybe practice this part. Make combinations. That was an example where we just moved using octaves. So playing the same pattern in 3 different octaves. So another idea I like to do is have a little bit more movement to span, a larger range. And what I would do, it's a little more difficult because now you're not just going to be playing the same shape, all right? And let's add in all the notes. So the other missing note would basically just be a D. So to keep this simple, we'll just keep it in groups of 3 notes per string, right? So basically you just have to play the one position. And I guess the easiest way to look at it is wherever your pinky ends up, you're going to play the note that's right before it with your first finger, and that's how you're going to move positions. So we, actually end up spanning from B to B up here. So what is that, 4 octaves? 1, 2, 3, 4. So it goes up higher. One more. So I'll play that a little bit slower once. The best thing that this is useful for, I think, is to do passages or runs that start from a low note and end up on a high. And there are so many different patterns and things you can do within that. Obviously, the most simple thing you could do is just take the 3 notes and create a triplet pattern. Now, you could either repeat the pattern in each position, which is fun, or you can just go straight up, So you might go,
Hey, I'm Andy Aladord, and in today's lesson, I'm going to be teaching you the essential things you need to know to be a guitar hero. Here we go. All right, an essential technique you need to know to be a guitar hero is to play some bitchin'ly fast E minor pentatonic riffs or E blues scale riffs using open strings, like Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Johnny Winter, all of your classic rock guitar heroes. Here you go. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is one of those riffs where I'm cramming in as many notes as I can, just about as fast as possible, but at the same time, keeping a semblance of a real phrase that's happening. So it's sort of broken up between 30-second notes and then 30-second quintuplets, which is 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got 5 notes on a downbeat, 5 notes on an upbeat. Da 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 da. Between straight 30 seconds, da 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 da. But like I say, you're cramming, so it's a combination of something that actually is phrased rhythmically, specifically, and something that isn't. It's just supposed to sound like a wash of notes. It's based primarily on the E blues scale, which descending would be G, E, D, B, B flat, A, G, E, D, B, B flat, A, G, E. And I start by going 3rd fret of the high E string, and a quick hammer pull off the 2nd fret. Land on the 3rd fret of the B. That's open high E to open B, hammer to the 3rd fret, and open high E again. So that's beat 1. Then the first half of beat 2 is pull off 3rd fret, open, 3rd fret, pull back, open, 2nd fret, B string, G string, D string. Then I'm going to go. I'm going to go 2nd fret, 3rd fret, hammer, pull off back to 2nd, pull off to open, land back on 2nd fret of the D. So you put those 2 beats together. Or you could use a push, sliding up and down. 2nd, 3rd, 2nd, open. Whichever you like. Then I played. That's the first half of B3. 2nd, open, 2nd, pull off, 2nd. Open, hammer to 2nd, 2nd, 2nd. So B3 is. Put it all together. And then the last beat. This is open D, 1st fret of the A, pull off to the open A, 3rd fret of the low E, pull off to the open E. And then you allow the open 6th string to ring when you play another E, 2nd fret of the D, and then another E, the open high E. And what I do is I pick the open low E with the down pick, and I pick the E note at the 2nd fret of the D with the down pick, letting them ring. But then I get that last open high E by picking with the ring finger of my picking. No real rock guitar hero would be worth his salt if he didn't know some essential minor pentatonic riffs for soloing. So I'm going to show you a handful of riffs right now. They're all going to be based on A minor pentatonic, played in 5th position. Here's the scale. All right, this first riff, I'm starting by bending 7th fret of the G string up a whole step, and I use my middle finger, and then I'm barring across the top 2 strings at the 5th fret. And then a pull off 8th fret to 5th fret on the B string. And it's like 2 triplets. So the first note carries for the first 2 notes of a 16th note triplet. Ba 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 ba. The way I'm picking this with the right hand is the first 2 picks are a downstroke. Then this is an upstroke, down, and a pull off. All right, this next riff, I'm just pulling off 8th fret to the 5th fret on the high E string, The index finger is still barred across the 5th fret on the top 2 strings, the B string and the high E string. And these are, again, 16th note triplets. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, with each triplet on a part of the beat. Downbeat, upbeat, downbeat, upbeat. All right, now I'm expanding on the idea of using these 16th note triplets, and I'm going down the whole scale in groups of 3. So you start 8th fret, pull off to 5th, followed by 8th on the B. Then you're going to go 1 note lower each time. Now we're going to go 5th fret on the high E, 8th fret, pull off to 5th. So 1 note lower by starting on 8th fret of the B, pull off, land on 7th fret of the G. And then 5th fret, 7th, 5th. Then continue that process going 1 note lower each time. So that's 7th fret, 5th, 7th, 5th, 7th, 5th, 7th, 5th, 7th, 5th, 7th, 5th, 7th, 5th, 8th, 5th, 8th, 5th. All right, our next technique is something called whammy trills. What's a whammy trill? Well, this is a whammy bar, we know that. And a whammy bar generally is used to either shake a note so it goes back and forth, which is a tremolo kind of effect, which is the reason why these are also known as tremolo arms, or for dive bombs. So here's the first whammy trill. I'm going to do a trill, which is where you move quickly between 2 notes. I'm trilling between the open G and the 2nd fret of the G string, and then I'm going to go down on the arm and come back up. So I'm just trilling. And then I come back up slowly. It sounds good when you do it fast. And you hear Jimi Hendrix do things like this on songs like Voodoo Child, Slight Return. You can also use fretted notes to do whammy trills. So in this one, I'm going to be hammering. This will be played in the key of A. And I'll be hammering between the 5th fret of the G string and the 7th fret. And I'm going to go up and down on the arm. And that riff would be like this. So what I did is, I did dips on each trill. Come off. Or you could do the same thing, go down. Another essential technique to be a true guitar hero is to do some fretboard tapping, as made popular by the great Eddie Van Halen. So here's a tapping riff. It's in the key of A. Here we go. All right, in this tapping riff, it's just a symmetrical pattern, meaning I do the same thing across all the strings. I start with a tap on the 12th fret of the high E string, and that's the pickup. So the subsequent open E string is the downbeat. So open, 5th, 7th, back to 12. And then I start the next string by starting on the 12th fret of the B string, and that's falling in the same place, which would essentially be the last 16th note, 2. So the open B is the downbeat of the 2nd bar. And it's the same technique, 12, open, 5, 7. Then I'm going to continue to the G, to the D, to the A. So it's the same thing on each string as you go across. And then when I get here, I'm going 12-7, 12-6, 12-5, 12-3, and then I'm going to go back and forth 5-3 against the 12. Bend that C up to C sharp because we're in the key of A, and that sounds like a major third. While this is being bent and vibratoed, I'm going to tap on the 11th fret, which is going to sound a high A because the 11th fret, which is normally A flat, is pulled up with the fret hand finger. Once you get all of these riffs together, you will be well on your way to being a guitar hero. It's a couple other things you should get. A blonde wig, long hair, build up those pecs, start walking around without a shirt on. You'll be a guitar hero in no time. I'll see you next time.
Oh, yeah. So here we go. There's the first pattern. Depends on you what you want to do. You can use your pinky if you want. Third pattern, here's your fourth one. There you go, here's your last pattern right here. So you're going to end up sounding, it'll be... So here we go. This is a little exercise you can do right here. Hey kids, this is Zach Wild. I'm Hootie and the Blowfish fame. Ozzy Osbourne, Blue Cheer, Black Label Society, and the Lawrence Welk Man. This scale here is, we're going to start with the A minor pentatonics, which is based also in C major. So we'll keep it simple. We'll start with A minor pentatonic. It goes something like this. That's, yes, my name is Mookie Fish, and that is lesson number 1. You practice it enough, you can get it as clean as that. Trust me on this. I've done it for several years now, actually several decades. That is pure clarity.
Zach's been watching too much YouTube.
That is it right there. Listen to the tonality. As you can hear the tonality. The great thing about blues is it teaches you how to sing when you're playing the guitar. You know, as opposed to just running scales. The great thing about blues, it'll teach you how to sing, and so the notes, it doesn't sound so much like you're running scales and patterns. You're actually playing music and you're speaking. Something like this. Very B.B. Kingish, very soulful, very beautiful. Keep practicing that one, kids. That's A minor as well.
We're gonna put some else on here.
It just starts off okay, and it just goes terribly downhill from there. Well, we just got my little Marshall over here. I got my, it's a Marshall valve state, and we also got the MG's Marshall sat. But I brought this up here, so I just, hell with it, I'll just plug into it anyways. So this is what I use. I'll use either or on the practice, on the bus. I'll practice, but I got to be honest with you, you could definitely, you could record a record with these amps right here. So as long as it says Marshall on it, we're good to go. But this is the advanced valve state technology over here. This is AVT-20. These are great amps right here. These are awesome amps as well. So, I mean, anything that says Marshall on it, you can't go wrong. There's a reason why Jimi Hendrix used them, Randy, and, and Eddie Van Halen, all the guys. So, but, just the little Marshall over here, and then I got, obviously, all my Dunlop pedals. I got, the Wild Wah that Jimmy, and Scotty, and the guys made for me. I use the Rotovibe over here to get you that, the Hendrixy. And then, obviously the Phase 90, the Eddie Van Halen pedal. So, just for certain solos or whatever, if I So that, the phase is great. It's a bit different than the flange, and it's different than the Rotovibe. And the Wild Overdrive that the guys gave me. So Jimmy and Scott made for me over at Dunlop.
Did you break the knobs off of that?
Yeah, so this way.
Break it? Oh, you can't.
No, it's because they move. So that's the reason why the guys make them so the knobs aren't on there. So because everything is just full blast. You know what I mean? This is a great pedal. All it does is take the sound of your amp and just gives you a bit more sustain. So and it doesn't change the sound of your amplifier, which is a beautiful thing. So and then I got a Boss Chorus pedal over here right now, and then the Chorus Ensemble. That's what I'm using right now. just just fattens things up a little bit, But when we're in the studio, usually though, if I'm gonna be doubling stuff.
Hi folks, this is Steve Vai here, and I'm here at the Mothership Studios in Hollywood. And I have a record out called Real Illusions, and there is a track off that record called Freak Show Excess that I'm going to tell you a little bit about. Freak Show Excess because it's kind of over the top. But this song basically is a reflection of my enjoyment of Bulgarian wedding music. That's right. Because if you listen to Bulgarian wedding music, you'll find that these guys are completely out of their mind, the guys that play. And the one band that I'm referring to is a band called Ivo Popasov and his Bulgarian wedding band. And their whole frame of mind when it comes to things like creating melodies and playing on their instruments and using time signatures and phrasing is completely alien. I mean, they're very comfortable in very odd time signatures, although they don't feel it as such. And they're very comfortable playing in different modes that basically have no reflection to Western music at all. And their phrasing and the way that they hit their notes is very different. So in order to find inspiration to apply to the guitar, I studied some of this music and came up with some cool techniques. And I'm going to play a little bit of the song. It's like a 7-minute fiasco, and just show you some of the things that I came up with for the track that I thought were interesting and a little unique to the style of music that I do. Okay, so I've got my Pro Tools session open here with about 4 million tracks on this song. Okay, so I created this little loop over the intro. And that goes on forever. And what I'll do is kind of sit for a while and just fool around with that intro. On for a while like that, you can discover some things. Okay, this next section here, I have this clean guitar coming in, and this is very characteristic of Bulgarian music. It's in 17/16, and the way that I broke this up is, and this is a good way to practice odd meters. When you're playing an odd meter, you don't necessarily, or at least the way I approach it is, you don't necessarily want it to sound so much like an odd meter, but I like it when it flows. So the way to do that is to make the rhythm feel second nature to you and completely natural. Soloing over an odd time signature takes a whole different feel also. I mean, you can solo in 4/4, but or what's natural, but what I would normally do is set up a vamp over something like this and just work on it, practice just solo, and try to come up with things that sound natural without necessarily thinking that I'm in 7, and come up with things where the phraseology of them sounds very natural and not regimented into a particular time signature. So here's some ideas. Okay, so I'll sit for a while until I come up with some interesting things or an idea, and then I'll work on it. And the solo in this song, if you listen to it, it doesn't sound anything like what I was just doing, because I really made a conscious effort to try to incorporate that Bulgarian melodic idea into the way I phrase the guitar solo. So if you listen to the actual solo that's on the record, you'll hear a lot of those little idiosyncrasies, those grace notes, which is very customary in the Bulgarian melody music, where they'll go like stuff like that. But you got to work on that and start out slow. And then they'll do a lot of things with these melodies with all these quick glissandos. When you start combining these things, you get some cool kind of things, So this song, if you listen to the other out of control, weird sections, you'll hear the same kind of thing going on. The point I'm making here is it's okay to immediately go to the thing you're always comfortable with. But if you look outside of the box and try to find some things that inspire you to do maybe a little different things on the instrument, or not so normal, or whatever, you can incorporate them into your playing, and eventually it'll feel very normal, but it'll be unique to what you do. So you got to kind of listen for those things and have the time and the patience to work them out. Your lesson for the day. Good luck.
That's like just barely pressing down on the strings, to get the real percussive, funky sound. That was the original idea with the James Brown stuff, I guess, was to make the guitar more like a percussion instrument rather than like a guitar. So it's basically just not holding, just barely pressing down, kind of making it so it just makes more of a percussive noise, so you just don't press down all the way. For me, that kind of playing has everything to do with just making sure that your right hand can just be really precise with stuff like that and just be really deep in the groove. It's kind of like the idea of when you subtract all that space that can go in between two things, like if you were to just play it like this, as opposed, it just creates this dimension to it, because then you've got a high thing and a low thing, and it's basically like two things rather than just playing a chord, which makes it just like one thing. So it was a good way to play acoustic guitar and to be able to kind of improvise with myself, because I could kind of send my head in two directions at once, Like an example of like improvising with that kind of thing, what you can get into, like You know, so you can just sit there and have fun with yourself, kind of be the bass player and the guitar player at once, you know. Well, it's, you know, you can't forget that it's all about playing music. It's not about what you can show people that you can do with a piece of wood in your hands that had strings on it. Like the idea is to make sounds that are good, and in music that's really so much about the relationships between the different things. So like for me, like if I'm sitting at home studying a particular guitar solo, it's not enough for me to just learn the solo. I have to make sure I understand the relationship between the notes that the lead player is playing and the chords that are being played behind it, or the bass line that's being played behind it. And I think that the fact that I take that approach to it comes out a lot in my soloing, because I'm often really absorbed in what the bass and the drums are doing, and I'm really thinking about trying to create dimension in relationship to that. You know, I'm not thinking in terms of just, oh good, they're giving me a blank canvas, now I can go crazy over it. Like it's more like constant interaction with the other people playing, and you know, it's and I guess on this album, like, it was really important to me to do a lot of speeding up and slowing down. And a lot of people play sort of straight up and down, and there's like an invisible, like if a song's tempo is like this, there's like a 16th note grid that's invisible that, and usually, like, in general, people play with a strict adherence to that, even if they're people who don't know anything about music. Sometimes, especially if they're people who don't know anything about the technical side of music, they stick to that thing like they're in jail, you know? They don't go outside of it. They don't play slower than that. They don't play faster than that. They don't speed up and slow down. They play a series of notes, all of which more or less fall into that, onto one of those 16th notes. They could be playing slow, but it's dun 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 dun, you know. So yeah, so the idea for me, like with a lot of the playing that I did on this album, was to really go outside of that and to not pay any attention to that at all. And even when I am playing things that are on time, as far as being 16th notes, I'll try to lay back on them or try to push forward on them. And if I'm doubling a guitar, I don't try to double it exactly. I like to have, like on that thing on Danny California where it's going. If you listen, the one on the right is playing. I think it's one of them's playing right on time, and the other one is playing a laid back version of it, and they create a cool stereo effect like that. I just didn't want to be straight in any way. So for me, like my playing, Chad and Flea did a lot of like experimentation with me in the studio, just sort of playing in a style where the guitar is more talking over the music, and it's finding a groove it's finding its own groove in the music other than what the bass and the drums are laying down, you know. Like making sure you're just stretching time out and making time go faster, making time go slower, just playing games with it all the time, and just trying to like twist everything around, and you know, just try to bend the fabric of reality, because it's a lot, you know, it's a lot easier to do with a guitar for me than it is with talking to somebody, or you know.
I'm going to demonstrate what I see as some of the differences between kind of more old school metal and the more modern techniques used. So I've just invented this hungover, we'll call it the hangover riff, because I just came up with it 5 minutes ago and I'm still kind of spinning from last night. And so this would be an example of what I would consider like a more of a late 80s Bay Area thrash kind of take on the riff. And then a more contemporary style of doing the same riff would go something like this. As you can see, they're the same pattern, the same note choices, but just with a different kind of cadence with the right hand and employing a little bit more triplets and faster picking. It gives it more of a deathy, kind of more contemporary feel.
Part of the thing that I do with my style a lot of times is that I'll slide into a chord like. So that makes the guitar chords really growl, like in, for example, Ashes in Your Mouth. Like, and Wake Up Dead, that's the way that goes. And it's too much guesswork. You know, if you know you're fretting down 3 and you're going to hammer on a fret forward, and these fingers aren't doing anything.
Rather than changing it up, you know, just doing. Just over and over and just build up, build up, build up as quick as you can.
This is a good rhythm exercise because it gets all your fingers working and also gets a gallop pick going, so it's like.
Of course, there's so many variations off that too, you know, you can. You can do like a little bit of string skipping stuff too.
And then the same thing goes with these 5-string ones. You just start them off real slow and bring them up. So it's all a matter of starting really slow and working your way up. But I'm not too good at them, obviously, because I haven't practiced enough. So practice more than me.
Sort of, and slow it is.
Like that, yeah. That's basically.
You know, primarily, I try to find something to do. Like lately, it's been this chromatic scale in a couple different positions. I don't know. Trying to find like a scale to actually practice gets really redundant. It's a discipline thing. It's better if I start like with a lick or something that I've been trying to work on or something like that. There's a lick that I've been doing in Do It For The Kids at the End, which I was practicing the other day, which is, I don't know what they call this, but it's sort of that sort of Indian kind of thing. It's just an exercise, really, and it was something I made up just to, again, keep myself busy. I noticed I couldn't do that a couple days ago. I just play. Just, you know, if I just sit down with a guitar and just do whatever for, you know, a half an hour or an hour, whatever, that's pretty much, that should do it for me. I try and just sit and see, maybe there might be a riff I'm working on, so then that gives me something to do. Like that one lick that I was talking about was something I started to do one night and I didn't finish it because I wasn't really sure what it was. So I thought, well, let's expand on that and see what that is. And so that just give yourself something set to work on. If you're just playing a scale, it becomes pretty mind-numbing, and you're not really doing anything. You're just sort of like, you go, oh, I can play it at high speed, I can do it at slow speed, I can work up from slow speed to fast. It just, somehow you get distracted doing that because it's not really engaging you. You know, every kid has a book of scales somewhere around. And you sit there and you play those, and if you don't apply them to some sort of music, there's no use for them. And once you start to play something like in the music, you start to take off and you forget about the scale. And then also it helps to spend 2 minutes standing up before you go out there. Because sitting down and standing up are two different things.
You know, that's I can notice you use your pinky a lot. Is that something you've worked on?
No, it's just that's natural. I try actually not to use it sometimes because different fingers have different ways of expressing themselves. So like sometimes, you know, like if I'm doing this lick, right? But if you use this finger, your middle finger, it's just got a different kind of a feel to it. So like if you go, that's one thing that sometimes depending on what lick I'm doing, I'll switch my fingers around. But the pinky is just really natural for any kind of a stretch. It's finger strength and also intonation. There's a certain kind of different way that you approach saying bending a note. Like sometimes I overbend, and it's easy to overbend with this finger, but you can overbend too much, whereas it's more controlled if you use your middle finger. And of course, there's always using your first finger to bend backwards. You know, licks up, and you could go. But something nice about the kind of pull when you don't have as much strength that you really have to pull that string, and somehow you can hear that in the sound that it makes. Every kid has a book of scales somewhere around, and you sit there and you play those, and if you don't apply them to some sort of music, there's no use for them. And once you start to play something like in the music, you start to take off and you forget about the scale. I know a lot of guitar players that are amazing with scales. I know I always talk about Steve. He's like my sort of technical guitar mentor. He always is telling me all these different things that you can do, but I usually find a hard time applying them. You know, there's a lot of just weird tricks that you can do, you know, starting on different notes, putting a different scale and different key, this and that and the other. And I can't play with feel or any kind of emotion and be able to sort of mix those two. So I just sort of make it up as I go along. But the main thing that I do go for is obviously the rock sound. So that really is the simplest scale, and then just putting different notes in that. I stick with as many different rock positions as I can get, and what changes them is, like, okay, say we're playing in C, right? And we're playing, 1-4-5 progression. Then you've got two different sort of very standard scales for it, and they have that scale all the way up the neck, right? And then the other one is the sort of, which is sort of an A really, but anyway, and those are two, and then you just start breaking up like, so you bring a third into it? No, not a third, a seventh into it. So there's that, and then there's these passing tones. So here's the major scale, or however you want to do it. You know what I mean, right? And then so in that position, you can go. Or stuff like that. And then when it gets into minor stuff, say it's in the same key, then you bring in all the flat third. And depending on the song, if it's got an F major in it, or sometimes it just sounds cool, where you bring in the sixth, right? Which in a minor note sounds pretty weird. But if you're doing a really sort of real minor stuff, then you have the flat sixth.
Hey, it is Billy F.
Givens right here, right now, and we're featuring the Gretsch Billy Bow. We're going to play a little blues licks for you, best we can. And we're celebrating a big anniversary here, so pay attention. One good starting point might be going back to the roots with Jimmy Reed. It doesn't get much simpler than this one. Jimmy Reed, of course, was accompanied by Eddie Taylor, who accompanied that particular riff with, and you can combine the two. And of course, the famous answer goes all the way back to Robert Johnson from the 5, back to the 1, and then Elmore James comes in. So here it is. Second most important thing is to learn your 1 and 5, and in the key of A. Descending. And following that, you got to give your trill. Gets a little quick there on that side. About making mistakes now. One of the favorite cornerstone licks, B.B. King, the slide up from the 1 to the 1. All-time favorite. You got the 1, followed by the 1. The 1-on-1. Now we're starting to get into the real finite side of things, though, the harmonics there. don't necessarily have to use the pick. You can So in conclusion, don't be afraid to use your fingers. Don't be afraid to use that pick.